Welcome, everyone. So, we are going to talk about chords and cutting chords because I think that's where most people come to understand the subject of chords or come to want to understand the subject of chords is when they are looking to cut chords. For example, how do I cut chords to my ex? Who I no longer am in communication with, but who keeps popping up in my life, right? Or how do I cut cords to my estranged partner or to a friend I no longer talk to? Or maybe you're feeling that somebody is draining your energy, that there is a connection, a relationship that drains your energy, but you can't seem to do anything about it, and you're wondering whether cord cutting is something for you. And then there are many other situations when, for example, a relative has passed away, but you still feel that they are coming up in your dreams, for example, and they talk to you in your dreams, or you keep seeing them on a regular basis, or a friend passed away and they show up in your dreams often or for a period of time, and wondering what is happening. So let's talk a little bit about it, about cutting cords, and maybe let's start with what cords actually are. So cords are, well, literally cords. They are energetic connections that we form with other people. So we form cords with actually everyone we meet, everyone whose presence we acknowledge. Let's say you're walking past someone on the street and you say hello to them or good morning. And that's it. You create a cord um, in your energy centers that go out to that person in order to relate to them. Really, our cording mechanism is a reflection of the fact that we are energetic beings. We are first and foremost beings of energy. So we connect to the energy of others just to be able to relate to them, to feel them. Without chords, we would not be able to understand other people, to to tune in to nonverbal cues that they give us, because as you probably know, 90% of information does not come from words. It comes from that something, that aura, that feeling, that, yes, gestures, eyes, the tone of voice. But is that all? I don't think so. You don't need to see a person to feel them. Yes, it can be more difficult, for example, talking on the phone as opposed to talking in person, or sending a text message as opposed to talking in person and seeing everything. But you can still connect energetically to a person via text message. You can still tune in. So there is always that something extra. There is more. There is always more than just the physical, than just the matter. And that's exactly what chords do. They connect us energetically to other people so that we are able to see them, to relate to them, to even read their energy. And this happens with anyone we meet. So with anyone we set our eyes on. So people randomly on the bus stop, people in traffic that we see, or maybe they see us. You are connecting to me energetically. Now these chords, they are very superficial, of course, and they're very easily dissolved if we just acknowledge someone's presence, or if we, for example, are teaching a yoga class, and then after the class we simply cut cords to our students, and that can be done simply by intention, or by using methods such as smudging, or running an incense stick through your aura, kind of just above the body, everywhere. So this method of cord cutting is, I think, what most people think about when they think about cutting cords, right? So I just bring my intention there and I start wishing for the cord to be cut. I'm oversimplifying it, of course. Most people I know, including myself, ask for help of a high being, the divine, or for example, it's very common to ask Archangel Michael to cut cords because Archangel Michael is a spiritual protector and he has a sword in his hand for battle and spiritual defense. But that sword we can visualize as, as cutting cords. And Archangel Michael is very real, is a high being, very high up, so divine in nature, really. It's one of the, let's say, emanations or aspects of the divine. And Archangel Michael is very powerful. And so we use the help of Archangel Michael, or maybe you know of some other high being, to cut cords. I work with Archangel Michael a lot. So cords are a very real energetic structure that connects us to people, to animals sometimes to objects that we own, to our property. Of course, a cord connecting us to our property is very different energetically than a cord connecting us to our husband, for example, or to our child. There would be very different emotions there and very different um, history. But sometimes, as you may have guessed, people do see their wives or their husbands or their children as their property. And then the relationship is all wrong and they feel kind of the same about their wife or their child as they feel about their home and their car. It's also real. And then this cord will have a similar structure. But cords are like those energetic pipelines that go from us to another person, to another being. We also have money cords, for that matter. We have cords, or maybe it's better to call them channels, that connect us to our sources of income and also that connect us to our well, let's say regular money drains, such as, for example, a mortgage. And this is a complicated situation because it's part giving money, but it's also having something, it's having property. So we are very complex beings energetically, and we cord to people and objects and to different versions of ourselves, even to our inner child or to a part of ourselves that, for example, felt very excited, very different, very happy, very free in a place. Let's say you lived on a semester abroad, or you took a few months off everything and you spent them working in a guest house somewhere or volunteering, and you feel like you left a part of yourself there in that time and space. Or you went on a holiday for the first time to, I don't know, Spain, and you connected to the place so strongly, you established such a powerful cord to that place, to the energy of that place, really, to everything that has to do with that place, that when you come back, you don't feel home at all. All of you is there, and it takes time for you to adjust, right? To actually feel that you're home where you are, and maybe you never quite do. This is common with people who are so-called place empaths, but generally sensitive souls can get very attuned to the field of a particular place, to the sum total of what a place, what a country is, really feel into it, and then have a hard time disconnecting from it. So they need a few weeks to get back to the routine. But that's sometimes place empathy can show up to be like this. But energetically, it's as if we have a cord to that particular place. And sometimes what happens is that we literally leave a version of ourselves in that place. It happens when you have been, for example, extremely happy. You maybe had a boring routine life at home, and then you spent a month or 2 months somewhere else, and it was incredible, right? It was, you were brave, you were exploring places on your own, you felt powerful, you felt free, and when you came back, you left that aspect of yourself that you are not able to use in your uh, normal life, or in the home life that you are used to. You left that part that you never knew, you left it at that place. So you feel that you have to go back there in order to be that better version of you, that stronger, braver, freer version of you. But it's also possible to turn it around and to start reclaiming that version of you and connecting it to your reality in the present, because it may very well be that where you are now needs that part of you that woke up in a particular place. And I know you may think, oh, well, there is no room for a free, open, brave me here where I live in my current situation. But working with chords to places can make you think differently, let's put it this way. Sometimes. Of course, sometimes you need to change something about your environment, and people do move. Although very often when they move, they find that they kind of keep dragging themselves along wherever they go. It's not just the free version of them, the liberated, the happy version of them that now lives in that special place, but it's now all of them. And so it becomes a lot more tricky. But all of this aside, we do have connections, not just to people, but to places, to our past lives, of course, to the universe, to the earth. And these are all cording mechanisms, because these are all energy channels which allow us to send energy and to receive it back. Now, sometimes what happens in relation to chords, for example, people say, why have I suddenly dreamt about my ex? I haven't seen them for the past 10 years. We didn't speak, and I don't even think of them. But suddenly I saw him or her in a dream, or I kept seeing them for past week, for example, every day. Or suddenly I have a dream about my, let's say, father who passed away. And I wasn't thinking of them. I wasn't doing anything. There was nothing to remind me of it. But for some reason, I saw him very vividly, and we had a conversation, for example, or something happened. So this usually means that the chords between you and that person you see in a dream, somewhat unexpectedly, they are being updated. And especially with people who have passed on, who have died, we can see them in dreams very often in the first 40 days after the death, because there is still a connection between the soul and the physical body to some extent. There are many, different versions of how exactly it happens, but there is still a connection. And the chords that connect you, and for that matter them, with anyone else they knew, they're also getting updated. So they are more strongly connected to the earth, to the physical plane, to the people they knew. And maybe to oversimplify it a little bit, it's like they're going over with their guides, with their soul, with their higher self. They're going over their life, and they're closing chapters, perhaps finishing the conversations that they never finished. the way our dreams interpret it, or the way our brain reads it in a dream, can be very different, sometimes quite absurd. So we don't need to read those dreams literally, but they are often an indication that the chords, the connections between you and that person who is no longer living, they're being upgraded, eventually cut, as they are moving on to a different incarnation, to a different version of themselves. So there is a process of transformation, of transmutation that is happening. And then people who have been gone for a long time, right, who have been dead for maybe for the past 10 years, 20 years, sometimes they also show up in dreams, because there is still some connection present. It usually happens with close relatives, because they are also connected to us by ancestral cord. So there is always an ancestral connection through the blood, not just through spirit. So they are always connected with us, even if they have passed on and their soul has gone on to another incarnation or is doing another service or work or whatever it is that is happening. They are always connected with us. And so there is some upgrade happening there. Happening in the relationship. So they can come up 10 years later and have a conversation with you in a dream. And as I said, for me, these conversations are usually quite absurd, or the situations are very absurd. I often dream of the relatives who have passed away, as if I know in a dream that they're no longer living. And it seems very absurd to me that what is going on. I'm like, well, but what am I going to do with you now? How am I going to present you to the outside world now that you are alive? How did you get out of the grave? Oh, I just climbed out, they say to me. So it can be quite absurd, but it's interesting what is happening, because those connections that we have, the energetic connections, they are there, and they keep going through certain upgrades. It can be that that a person is, for example, going on to another incarnation, and they are clearing their channels with you, and so that's why they come up in dreams. So back to chords and cutting chords. And why are some chords more difficult to cut than others? As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, it's actually, it's very easy, once you know what you're doing, to cut chords from people you randomly connect with. Really, what is needed is your intention and connecting to the light, to the divine light. So asking either for help of a high being, a being of light, such as Archangel Michael, or just simply asking God to come in and clear, if that is more comfortable. Setting an intention to cut chords, bringing in the powerful visualization tools such as violet flame or white light, imagining, pulling out a chord, etc. So those methods, most of you probably already know about. And still, there are some chords, there are some connections that will not go in this way, right? There can be connections that you can effectively cut, but then they reestablish themselves, which is actually fine, because as I said, chords, well, we can't really live without chords, because how will we relate to anything or anyone? So chording is a very natural mechanism. It's how we establish contact with the outside world. If we have no chords, we're dead. And even then, as I was just telling you, it's not quite true, because we are still connected to our relatives through an ancestral cord, and their energy is tied into ours. somehow. So there is still a connection, no matter how weak. But we, of course, the chords that we have with significant relationships, they store a lot of information, they store a lot of feelings. Think, for example, a romantic partner or a best friend that you see every day for the past 20 years, let's say. All the information of anything that is happening between you is stored in the chord, in that energetic channel connecting you. So there can be good things, but there can also be bad things. Now, with sexual partners, it's even more complicated because the chords of sexual partners, they, in most cases, they actually last through lifetimes. They don't dissolve with death like most other chords do, but they actually last throughout lifetimes. And that is why we feel so strongly when we meet someone whom we had already known in a past life. The sexual connection, the emotional connection, it is 10 times more powerful. In some cases, it feels 100 times more powerful because the chord maybe has the memories of 100 lifetimes. Of course, as soon as the connection gets activated, right, it's as if it explodes, it comes to life again, and all the memories, the good and the bad, they come to life again as well. So this, in relation to sexual chords, for example, we do, and especially women, women do store the energetic imprint of all their sexual partners in their, not just their energy, but in their womb and in their DNA. So the DNA of a child is affected by the energetic imprints, but also by the DNA of all the men that a woman had sexual contact with, not necessarily only the biological father. So as mind-blowing as it is, there is research to support that. And the same goes with, sexual connections. We store the energetic imprints of those partners, and we store the emotions, the feelings, the memories between us in the energetic cords that connect us. And if it is the longer, of course, the longer the relationship, the stronger the cord. And sexual cords, as I said, they are permanent in the sense that they even last throughout lifetimes. So for all of us free spirits, that might be something to think about, to consider that actually cording is an important mechanism, but it's also a mechanism that makes us think and makes us, exercise caution, because we don't want to be corded to thousands of people throughout the universe, and we don't want to give our energy to them. Now, how do we give our energy to them? Through cords. Well, draining cord is basically a connection where you give more energy than you receive. That's why it can be very exhausting teaching, for example, because you give, not just your knowledge, but also the energy. And the students, they just suck it all in. So it can be very, very draining. So you need time to recharge. Now, draining cords in relationships, they often form when there is some imbalance and when a relationship becomes codependent or toxic. So, and people often create those mechanisms to attach themselves to the energy. That happens completely subconsciously. But those relationships where people are constantly arguing, but they keep staying together, or where they split up and separate every week, and then they come back together. And these patterns, they create a burst of energy, because whether it's positive or negative, it's something that blows up and that fills the energetic connection between them. So it's like a cord lights up on fire, right? There is energy. And actually, both may feel very energized by this. It's just a pattern, so they can't relate in a common way, let's say, or in a balanced way. They need to fill up their connection with energy through this, through breaking up, through something dramatic happening, and almost like starting everything again. It's like the cord lights up, goes up in flames, and then they're starting anew. Sometimes we can effectively cut the cord and it comes back together. Returns to us. If, for example, we really did cut a cord with someone, but we see them every day. But effectively cutting a cord that stores a lot of memories and a lot of feelings, it actually requires us to address those feelings individually, one by one, or at least deal with them energetically. But as soon as you begin dealing with them energetically, also the feelings themselves, the memories come up. If you are very detached, it will only be images or memories. If you are not detached, you will start feeling the feelings. So those heavy cords that store a lot of feelings, that store a lot of emotions, we can't just cut them, and Archangel Michael can't just cut them, at least not immediately, until we connect to the emotions and the feelings that are stored in this cord, until we turn the flow of energy. So these cords, they don't just go away by asking someone to do it, or by wanting to do it, or by imagining that we're doing it, but we need to address the lessons, to see the memories, and to start working through those memories. Sometimes it's enough to just see and recognize what is in that cord. Sometimes we need to recognize that we are giving all our energy away because we want to, as in that situation where people are breaking up all the time. They want the energy burst. Or sometimes we like being a victim or a rescuer because, maybe it makes us feel better. Maybe we don't want to deal with our issues. Maybe we want to blame everyone else, right? Or why wouldn't they rescue themselves? I have to go and rescue them all the time. Well, did they ask you to be rescued? Did they ask you to heal them? Did they ask you to help them? No. Well, then why are you doing that? Or because I don't know, because I feel that's my mission right there. That's my sense of purpose. Without me rescuing anyone, who would I be? What would I be? Right? So sometimes those energetic cords, the draining cords, are actually a reflection of our choice. We choose to give our strength away, give our energy away, just because otherwise we would feel quite empty. So there are many imbalanced cords that we have to other people. Some of them are imbalanced just by nature of the relationship. As I said, teacher-student relationship is often imbalanced to an extent because a teacher gives more. But then, of course, the student can give emotionally or can give in some other way. But there are some cords that are this by nature, healer, patient, for example, doctor, patient, nurse, patient, etc. And so then this energetic depletion, it needs to be recharged. But then from some people, we also receive a lot of gratitude in return. So it's not a given, right, that, for example, a teacher always is drained by his students. Sometimes their gratitude fills the teacher up much more than the energy he gives. And that's why we often have money as a substitute for energy in those uneven relationships. So, for example, a teacher that gives of their time and energy receives money as a substitute, as an energetic restitution. And the universe always compensates for the energy. That's another thing. When you have given of your energy, when you have given of your effort, the universe registers it. So, whatever, for example, if you are giving free healing sessions, for example, and you use a lot of energy on it, the universe recognizes the other person as in debt. Whereas you feel depleted, yes, and there's probably a breach in your energy field as well, but the universe will compensate somehow. Now, the problem is the other person who received a free healing session, they will be considered in debt. So they might lose money, they might overpay, they might, the car may break down, sudden repairs, need to buy a new fridge, need to fix the window. We don't notice those things, but everything is balanced. So, or maybe money just falls out of their pocket on the street. So everything we owe, everything that, whether energetically or financially, we pay it. It's sometimes just in the ways we don't recognize, because there is no law that says I have to pay it to the person that I owe it to. I just pay it to the universe. Sometimes the energy we use is the payment, sometimes money, sometimes things. Money is a very common equivalent of energy, but it's not the only one, right? It can also be time, it can also be effort, it can also be the emotion that you spend. But everything is eventually set to zero. Everything is brought into balance, and in most cases in this lifetime. So there is no need to wait for karma to catch up with someone who owes you. They will pay it back. Just the problem is, there is no law that says they have to pay it back to you. The ego may not be very happy with it, but that's the connections. That's how it works energetically. What it has to say for chords is that also with the people who owe us, we do create draining chords, and they can be also draining financially. So the deeper we go into the subject of chords, you can say the more complicated it becomes. But I mean, talking about it theoretically, it's a little bit dull, and it's counter and maybe even terrifying, because then you would be afraid to go out and to let people look at you, because now with all those chords, like which one of them are draining, who is draining, who is connecting to me. But this is something to think about, especially in terms of sexual chords, because sexual chords are formed even with the intention, for example, of sexual contact. Okay, those chords are not permanent, but they can be, in some cases, can last for decades. There can be distortions and illusions in chords. The emotions that are stored in chords, the first impressions that are stored in chords, often influence the whole course of the relationship as it moves along. So this chord work is very fascinating and can really go as deep as you are willing to. I have actually created a small course on working with chords. It's a beginner intermediate stage course where I focus on guided meditations and some practical tips to, first of all, scan for chords, recognize the energy in chords, how it flows, how they look to you, simple ways of cutting chords, general ways, and then working with more complex chords, chords that connect us to other people, that connect us to those, difficult relationships that we can't seem to get rid of. So this course is very experiential, and I have it in video format, and then I have guided meditations to work with, so 30-minute, 45-minute meditations. that are an introduction to this world of chords. And then after those meditations, after practicing them for a while, you will hopefully be able to scan those chords for yourself and go then further or deeper in that field and work with each chord individually and gradually clear the most difficult chords, cut them, or improve them so that the relationship itself improves. It is actually possible to clear the energy in the chord and improve a relationship dramatically. Now, we cannot make someone feel what they don't feel or see you in a way that they don't want to see you, but it's possible to improve a relationship, to reduce the charge, to gradually have the energy flow more smoothly. So if you are interested, I'm posting a link to the course under the video so that you can check it out and see if it's maybe something for you. And as always, I look forward to connecting with you either in the next video or check out my website, send me a message, and I wish you all the best and many blessings, and I hope you enjoyed learning more about chords, and I hope you learned more about chords from this video. So all the best and many blessings to you.